are so timely, right? Sometimes we hear of a language as a barrier, but you are sharing so much more, a different perspective that is asset based on what students bring to the table and what they already know. So
That's,
those we look forward to hear about those pedagogical examples.
thank you. That's a perfect segue to the first example I have. Oh, the second one. Um, so one thing that we did with Dr. Walton and our other colleagues, you had the opportunity to, some of you had the opportunity to meet last semester, was looking at the um, lesson study cycle, but more in like longitudinally. So the first cycle that we did was particularly with the purpose of learning about our students' identities, so that we could continue doing other lesson study cycles based on the information would learn we learned with from our students. So we did this intersectional identity mapping activity, in which students were had the opportunity to share their identities. We did like a pop-up activity, and they have to move and show us who who identified with certain statements. And then we did an analysis. We learned some core concepts about dominant culture, visible and invisible identities, etc. And then we did a reflection work um, based on that information, and that would be the critical reflexivity part that we achieved in that lesson. So that is just the intersectional identity mapping activity is one example about how we look at students from an asset-based perspective as holders of knowledge, as people who bring so much to the table that we need to learn about before we do culturally sustaining pedagogies. If we don't know who our students are, then what are we going to sustain? What are we going to centralize in our classroom? um, then, the example is using social justice standards. This is these standards were created by the project of Southern Law Center, and we integrated standards. So not only in each of our cycles, but also in each of the lessons that we taught, we identified at least one standard from the identity lens, or the diversity, the justice and action lens. Also, another example of how we see students as holders of knowledge is doing a preliminary questionnaire to learn about our students. So asking them, what are your strengths as a student? What could you improve? How can your instructor support you so that you can learn more effectively? So those questions are very important, so that we know where, like, we co-construct and we understand what those objectives will be for the lesson cycle, um, from information from our students. Um, and that question, like, what have you found the most challenging about your program? So that is like making our lessons relevant for students, instead of just going or identifying the objectives of our lesson study cycle with only the lens of the instructors. And then provide bilingual and multilingual materials in the in our lessons, uh, inside the classroom, and as research tools. I remember that in one of the projects, it was super important to collect to include interviews in Spanish, because then students were able to open up and to talk about their experiences, and it was kind of meta and interesting to see that the student in the interview was sharing with me that in the class that we were working, it's an engineering class, this student felt intimidated about for to participate in class because of his Spanish. Like, he didn't feel so great about his English skills. So in the interview, he shared that he didn't feel confident about speaking in English. So that was super important for me to say, okay, then we know what's going on. And if I didn't had opened the opportunity to interview the student in Spanish, maybe the student wouldn't have been willing to give us the interview, right? So that was super important to create those opportunities for students to share their knowledge in their language that they prefer. And that's the last point: allow students to conceptualize in their preferred languages. And that is kind of the whole translanguaging pedagogy, pedagogical practices. We, even if we don't know the students' languages, we can create opportunities for students to take notes in their preferred language, to talk with other peers in their preferred language, like conceptualizing that, or even turning in assignments or reflections in their own language, so that they can provide the rich data that we want to see in our research. And then we can use other tools to find out what the student was sharing, if we are not sharing the same language background as with the student. And those are some specific examples that I have for the lesson study in terms of the multilingual classrooms.
Thank you so much, Dr. Martín-Corredor. This is amazing because I think everyone here is wondering, how do we do this? What does it look like? We can sometimes see the challenges, but have sometimes no idea of what it looks like. So pedagogical examples and practical insights are helpful for this community, so we can attempt something, right? We're not saying it's going to be successful all the time, but it's something that is happening, has happened, and we are finding ways to, as you're saying, connect to students and make it sustainable. Lesson study has been around for a long time, but now we need to adapt to the different contexts that we are in. So thank you so much both for sharing. Right now, we have Dr. Robert Evans, the educational specialist in Hawaii State Department of Education, Office of Curriculum and Instructional Design. Welcome. We are happy to have you in this talk, and the floor is yours. Welcome.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And I'm sorry to be tardy to this. Moving into a new office here is coming with unexpected issues, but I'm happy to be here today. So let me see if I can share my screen. Let's see. There we go. There. And let's see. Slideshow. All right. Is everybody able to see the slide now?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So I guess my contribution for today is to give a little bit of a practitioner lens on lesson study and its connection to English language arts and to multilingual learners. I developed this cycle while I was an instructional coach at a middle school. half of my day was instructional coaching, and the other half of my day was intervention for multilingual students. And so it follows the logic of lesson study, but with a lot of modifications. I guess being in a situation as a practitioner, there's a lot of pressures that are on teachers and on me, a lot of institutional requirements. And so making lesson study fit was a little bit of a gymnastics exercise. So to get lesson study to fit, I had to kind of, first of all, use the professional learning structures that were already built into the school. So we had data teams and professional learning communities and instructional coaching cycles, unit internalization sessions where teachers would kind of dig deeply into the unit before teaching it to understand it. And so I had to use those structures to make lesson study happen. So as I introduced lesson study, I started with just having teachers reflect individually. We kind of established that inquiry mindset just informally. And then I moved into instructional coaching with individuals, leading them through the lesson study cycle individually. And then we were able to come together into a professional learning community and share what each individual teacher was working on in their cycle together in that PLC. And then after a cycle or so, the PLC kind of adopted a theme, and everybody started aligning their individual projects together. The last thing that I had to keep in mind as I was adapting lesson study for use here in the United States, from a position not of institutional power, just kind of a grassroots effort, was that teachers need a place to share what they're doing, and so I kind of just adopted this idea that lesson study would be flexible. The PLC would be a place to share out what everybody was learning, and I let the process kind of flow from there. And I think it eventually approximated lesson study. I think I already mentioned these. These were the ingredients from which our lesson study was constructed. Unit internalization, lesson internalization. The LEAP coaching cycles were these instructional coaching cycles that also are tied to the teacher's professional evaluation. So a little bit of a tension there in terms of being collegial versus being an evaluator. The professional learning communities, something called a learning lab, and data-driven instruction teams. These were all ingredients that were kind of hardwired into our school day. So it wasn't something I was introducing. I was just borrowing these structures to use for lesson study. The unit internalization, we had these forms from the district that we had to follow. And so within that structure, I was able to kind of create the study phase of lesson study. We would study this, we would go through the unit internalizations, but with an eye towards eventually doing a lesson study cycle. I mentioned the professional learning communities. This was the structure that we used at our school. What do we want our students to learn? How will we know if they learned it? What will we do if they already know it? And what will we do if they don't know it? And so we adapted the PLC structure again to be kind of a place to share out ideas. And so during the study phase, people were kind of sharing out ideas for what they were like researching, or what they were like finding in the curriculum, or what they were finding from other colleagues at other schools. In the planning phase, people were sharing ideas for how to implement the curriculum, and specifically how to adapt it for our multilingual learners. And then we did the learning lab, which took care of the observation and reflection. The coaching cycle kind of approximated a lesson study cycle. We'd set an intention, we'd engage in learning, we'd reflect on learning. The missing piece, of course, was the collaborative observation, which I added in that learning lab model. And so the learning lab was a district initiative to get everybody into the same classroom. it was more of a model classroom than an inquiry style classroom. You know, in lesson study, you go to learn by reflecting. In a model classroom, you more go to learn, to see best practices, and then adopt those best practices back into your classroom. But we were able to adapt the learning lab to our purposes. We set some norms. You know, the primary learner in the lab is the observer. The observer's purpose is to leave with a next step. Avoid talking to other observers or the teacher. Keep language neutral, and focus on the teacher and student behaviors and talk. It was easy for the teachers to focus on the teacher behavior, but I tried to really focus them in their observations on the student behavior, trying to really establish that lesson study norm of like an insight into how students are learning. And so we kind of built on these foundational beliefs. Teaching is personal, but not private. We're smarter together. Teaching is incredibly complex. No one has it nailed. And there are always ways to get better for the students. And we went through some rounds to structure our reflections. These were kind of designed to keep time moving quickly, but I really loved it when the teachers kind of took over and abandoned these prompts and then started doing their own things. That's when I knew that the lesson study had really come to life. And so the kind of non-negotiables, I let these be negotiable, and I let teachers move away from them when they wanted to. But the non-negotiable was no compliments, no blaming, only gratitude. So no compliments. I didn't want us to get stuck in the culture of nice. So I told teachers, don't say, you did a really good job at this, or you did a really good job at this. I told them no compliments. On the flip side, I didn't want anybody to be overly critical and make somebody feel bad, especially the hosting teacher. And so no blaming, no, it's not the teacher's fault. Don't say you did this wrong or you did that wrong. And so I set that as a non-negotiable. And then that last one, only gratitude, we ended up structuring a lot of our comments was, I was really thankful that I was able to learn today. I was really thankful to these students for showing us. I was really thankful that, we were able to see the theme of, and we kind of went with those sentence stems. And so that ended up being the way that we went about lesson study at the school. I think it started individually, and then once we were able to introduce it into the PLC, there was some collaboration. Once we went through the first learning lab cycle and people saw the room, there was a realization that, oh, we could all have a theme and we could all like look at the same stuff. And so it got kind of narrower and narrower and closer to lesson study as we went. I guess a last comment was the focus on our language, our multilingual learners took place after that first observation, that first learning lab, when people had the chance to step out of the teacher role, not have the pressure of leading the lesson forward, and just they were able to just watch the students, and they were realizing, oh my goodness, these students, they're not understanding the words that are being spoken to them. They're not understanding, they're not understanding the basic directions. They're not understanding, all of these things. I think it's easy to lose that. Language is so transparent for us as, as fluent speakers, that when we have multilingual learners in our room, we forget that, these things that seem basic and easy to us that's a very steep learning curve for those students. So lesson study really helped those teachers by taking the pressure off and letting them see what was actually going on in the minds of our multilingual learners. So there are my comments. Again, apologies for my tardiness today, and thanks for listening.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Evans, for sharing with us your experience with lesson study. I really liked the foundational beliefs and norms for the lab, and how those might be different from the general theory of lesson study, but at the same time apply to the context that you were doing and applying to lesson study from a practitioner perspective. And there is a big gain on that. We don't have much time. I only have a final question, so please think about it, and you have a maximum of a minute to share this with us. We have been talking about literacy, language, and multilingual teacher education and lesson study. We will agree that we have contextual constraints and possibilities. So how did these local conditions like policy, environment, school structures, community language practices shape what lesson study made possible? Where did these contextual factors constrain the work, and where did they strengthen it? So that we can have this general picture of, hey, it's not easy, but you know what, we can do it. What will be your insights and thoughts about this? Please don't take more than 1 minute. So we will start with Dr. Lina.
Thank you. So, yeah, as I said, the culturally sustaining pedagogies, my rule of thumbs is exploring, and also part of that exploration is the context, to acknowledge and to bring the social context of the students. So one of the things that we identified when we were exploring and when we were discussing the concerns of the students was that our teacher educators had many questions about how to integrate and why we need to integrate students' home languages into the classroom, or if we should or should not use books that are being banned, and how they could navigate those policies. So those are like two examples. And so we came up with a lesson integrating those issues and in form of case studies. So that's kind of like being responsive and centralizing students' questions that they have and what they are living and how they are experiencing in the context of education, in our case, multilingual education.
Thank you so much for sharing this amazing. Thank you, Dr. Walton.
I think it's important that one, you build community first, and have a focus. So one thing that we all did in a lot of the lesson study cycles that I participated in, studies that I participated in, have been create a like I don't, I'm lacking the word right now, but like almost a community respect agreement of what this is, what this looks like. And where we're going to go, and then making the focus on the work, and not and kind of like Rob was saying, have it to where we're not saying niceties, but we're looking at the work itself.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks for sharing. And Dr. Evans.
I think that being a practitioner without the institutional power to say, this is how it will be, we will do lesson study and we will do it this way and this way and this way and this way, but instead having to like create it out of the ingredients that were already available to me, it helped me expand from being kind of maybe ideological about lesson study. In Japan, I think there's two ways to study lesson or to do lesson study. You can, or at least two ways, but there's a focus on like technical expertise, learning how to do manage the curriculum, and then the reflective practice. And I was ideologically committed to reflective practice to the extent of ignoring the technical expertise side. And so the constraints made me focus on the technical side, which actually meant that the ideas happened. So I think it was good that way.
This is powerful. Thank you so much. Thank you for being with us today. Carrie, I will pass it over to you.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and dismiss our participants, and I'll create a practice room for us that we can chat really quick. So thank you for attending. This was a great session. I feel like we need to do part 2, or maybe like a public lesson, part 2, like what you guys did last, but do like a online version. I'm very interested in your point about working with AI and doing that meaningfully with teachers. So Andrew, we're gonna have to talk some more. But thank you so much for coming. This is a great time together, and it's really wouldn't be possible if we didn't have people coming and sharing their work, and people coming and asking great questions. So thank you all for coming in and making this possible. So thank you also for leading, Johana. It was great. Thank you.
Thanks.
And then I'm going to put us in a room real quick.
Oh, okay.
Okay.